Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television. Well, I'm now being joined by an economist, I will say a renowned economist and financial and management consultant, Dr. Biodun Adedipe. We will be looking at the economy in the past 6 months. You're welcome, Dr. Adedipe. It's good to have you on the program.
It's my pleasure.
Well, talking about the economy in the first half of the year, generally, how would you assess it for the year?
Yeah, thank you very much. I will say it depends on whose perspective we are looking at the economy from. And I will take it in very broad terms. If you look at it from the perspective of the government, you will get a particular view of how the economy performed. And then when you look at the private sector, you probably will hear a different story.
Well, now, I want to start with the private sector now.
Good. Right.
So let's hear from the private sector.
Now, for the private sector, what you probably hear is that, yes, it's a very tough business environment. No doubt there are opportunities in there, quite all right. But it's been pretty tough in the first half year. When you hear the sound bites of most of the operators in the private sector, that is what you likely get. So that it's been pretty tough. But again, I mean, as you keep tinkering with your strategies, you know you have to survive and you have to grow your business and find a way of doing all that profitably. So that is what I will summarize as the view or perspective of a person in the private sector. Tough environment. Okay? Now, for
the person in the government.
Yeah. A person in government will look most likely at the macroeconomic statistics, which in the real sense of it, very positive. Growth of the economy, that's the gross domestic product, 6.56%, as we earlier mentioned, okay, for the first quarter. And there is no indication that the economy slowed down in the second quarter. So which means for the first half year, we might be looking at a growth rate of between 6.6, 6.2%, for the first half year of 2013. Now, if you look at several other macroeconomic statistics, inflation rate has been largely single digit from the beginning of the year, okay, dropping from 12% at the close of 2012, then down to 9%. It got up a little bit, and came down to 9.1%, then of course 8.6%, now 9.0% for the month of May. So that again will appear very, very positive, that at least it shows clearly that the government has a good handle on the general price level, that it is coming down in real terms. Now, if you look beyond that, you then look at interest rates. You probably will say, well, in the real sense of it, not much change. But of course, when you probe further, you now pair it in terms of lending rates different than deposit rates. So what happened to those two? Between December 2012 and June 2013, you again will find that the prime lending rate, official statistics anyway, as reported by the central bank, okay, ended at 16.66%, June 2013. Now, what happened to deposit rates? Instead of growing along with lending rate, it went down. So which means for depositors, they had a lower rate offered for their monies when they took them to the banks. But for those who borrow from the bank, the borrowing customers, they had to pay more.
Now, if I may cut in there,
yeah.
What is the implication of this, what you've just explained, the lending rate, deposit rate? Yes.
So now, two angles to it. A depositor should be seen primarily as an investor in the banking system, because you are putting your money there in expectation that we get some return on that money, and of course you are assured of safety of your money and the rest of it. Now, if the rate on deposit, the average, dropped to 7.74%, as reported by the central bank, that means as a depositor in banking, on the average, you got less than the return you enjoyed in 2012. Okay? So which on its own could be a disincentive to putting your money as deposit with the banks. And again, I will later look at that vis-a-vis what is happening in the capital market. Okay? For the borrowing customers, yes, prime lending rate, 16.6%, as reported by the central bank, based on what the banks submitted to them. But in reality, the actual lending rate is about 20% per annum.
20%, exactly.
Okay? So it then means that for the borrowing customers, it is a lot expensive borrowing. But of course, when it is inevitable, you have to borrow. And that means you have to work it very hard too to be able to meet your obligations.
All right, before we go into those details,
yes.
well, talking about those figures
yeah.
from the perspective of the government,
that's right.
I will look at the macroeconomic indicator, the GDP.
That's right.
You talked about the increase. Now we have 6.59%, quite impressive.
Indeed.
Now, the phenomenon of growth, without development seemed to be the trend.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
did it in any way change in the quarter under review, or rather in the period under review?
Yeah, I will say it did not change because I saw some worrisome trends in those official statistics on the GDP. It is one thing to grow the GDP. Okay, you might say, yes, it's good news in terms of the growth for the first quarter, because growing by 6.56% first quarter of this year fared better than 6.34% growth in the corresponding period of 2012, which was first quarter of 2012. That one is good news. Now, last quarter of 2012, growth was 6.99%. So, what I would say, an analyst who is merely looking at numbers will say, there was a drop from 6.99 to 6.56. But if you look also historically, the pattern usually is that the economy picks up slowly, usually in Nigeria, and then it gathers momentum as the year goes by. So that is not worrisome. But where I have my worry is this: the contributions to the GDP, that is the sectoral contributions.
The sectoral.
And I will single out 5 sectors. Now, 3 of them give me some worry. 2 of them will represent good news. Now, if you look at petroleum oil sector, accounting for 13.75%.
About 14.75%.
Exactly. Now went to 14.75% in the first quarter of this year.
Yes.
Now, that would mean that, yes, petroleum oil and gas is now contributing more to our GDP. That on its own will appear like good news. But my worry there is that what is happening to that sector right now, and what is it we expect to happen to it going into the future. All right? So, and the issues in there are the following. New investments are not coming as they are supposed to be. Most of the IOC, that is international oil companies, are selling their oil blocks to marginal operators who don't, in any case, have sufficient funds, to process those assets. Then you also consider the fact that Nigeria has been a dominant supplier of crude oil and natural gas to the world markets over the years. But as we talk today,
production is
coming down. In fact, the figures show clearly that between January and March this year, the production figure came less short of 2 million barrels per day on the average. And of course, export figure for March came to 1.79 million barrels per day. Now, all of those are worrisome statistics, by the way. But the even more worrisome is the fact that as of today, there are 15 African countries either already producing crude oil or they are prospecting for crude oil. As we talk also now, possibly by the time we see the statistics, by the end of June this year, Angola possibly had leveled with Nigeria in terms of volume of production. So which means that new investments migrating from Nigeria to Angola are already showing in the numbers. So that should be worrisome to us. Now, yes, we've shifted in terms of destination of our market that we sell to, from the US to Asia. But if you look at the prospects for this year, when the outlook for the economy was formed, late 2012, early 2013, the expectation for the world economy is that, yes, the Chinese economy will grow this year, and of course the Brazilian economy. And through them, they will produce some growth in demand for hydrocarbons. Okay? Now, what is happening to those 2 economies? The Chinese economy recently is slowing down, one. And of course, we know the Brazilian economy is in turmoil of all these protests and the rest of it. So the kind of growth expected to drive the demand for our oil is now having a question mark somewhat. And that is aside from the discovery of huge quantities of shale oil and alternative energy sources from hydrocarbons. So we should now be more worried about the weak linkage between our oil economy and the non-oil economy.
Yeah.
So that is on the one side. Now, if you look at the contribution of manufacturing,
exactly.
That should give anybody
1.14%.
Down from 4.7%
exactly.
2012. Now, that should be worrisome. That means we are not producing. We've always known that. But now the official statistics are staring us in the face, telling us that, look, within the first quarter of this year, there was a dismal drop in the contribution of manufacturing to our GDP. So, which also means that if manufacturing contributed less, that would mean we depended a lot more on imported goods and services. That again shows in the statistics. Wholesale and retail trade went from 13.7% to 14.75%, which of course again also means that, hey, we're actually importing a lot more rather than trying to strengthen our manufacturing base.
Yeah, for the first quarter, it's actually 23.75%.
Yes, 23.75 from 19.7 to 23.75.
Yeah.
So, and that is quite worrisome. Okay, so it means we are depending more on the rest of the world for what we consume than hitherto. That's a worrisome trend. But, I said there are also good news. Okay, the good news also in the same statistics are with respect to building and construction and real estate. Both of them grew in terms of contribution to GDP. So that will suggest to me that, yes, these are indeed job creators and growth drivers.
Well, that growth, I mean, talking about the building and construction, the growth at 3.27%, you think that's okay?
That's contribution. Well, not really okay in the sense of it, but if you look at the trend, that trend shows that it grew from its contribution in 2012 to the 3-point-something% it recorded there. The same thing with real estate, even though very low in terms of contribution, but it also showed a growth trend. Okay, so which is some good news. So the question then is, are we going to grow that? And that will bring us back to government's own fiscal operations. Which now means, what does the government spend money on?
Yeah, but what about agriculture?
Now, yes.
33.69%.
That's right.
Well, would you say that the government has really, done enough in that sector? We could see a lot of the minister coming up with a lot of policies.
Yeah,
and,
positive, I would say positive soundbites.
Yeah.
Okay, quite all right. We've gotten back to where we are supposed to be in terms of policy direction. Over the years, yes, agriculture has been the dominant sector in the contribution to GDP. But that contribution also, if you notice, has been dropping. Okay? And the major challenge is that, yes, dominant in contribution to GDP, but productivity very low. But even now that the government is putting a lot of attention on agriculture through the Agri-Transformation Agenda, ATA, now that is good policy direction. But the more attention should go in, how do we enhance productivity? First is, yes, we have a lot of arable land, but where is that arable land? And where the arable land available for large-scale commercial farming, what is the security situation in that area? That's an issue. Now, even if you talk about preparing the land, as we had been told in recent times in dialogues on this issue, that it is not enough to have the land, it is important to have the land in the quality that will produce the yield we require. Which means land preparation for commercial farming is not just about getting the land and clearing it. There is the content, that is the chemical composition of that soil that will support the kind of farming you want to do. Now that will require a whole lot of money. And there is no farmer that can access money for such and do successful commercial farming because of the gestation period. Because to prepare the land for that kind of farming, you need between 2 to 3 years. So how many commercial banks will give you facilities, to prepare the land and wait that long before you start cultivation? And in any case, when you begin cultivation also, there's a gestation period before you get to harvest. So in which case, the moratorium period will be far, far out of what commercial banks can do. So which means in the Agri-Transformation Agenda, government should not only talk about what we want to do along the value chains, more attention should be given to land preparation.
Okay. Now, looking at all of these, the statistics, when you started, your discussion, you did mention that from the perspective of a government person, we've done well going by the statistics.
That's right.
Now, does it mean an average Nigerian would always ask, does it mean looking at these statistics, they are not understanding it, that look, we need to do more, and perhaps they are channeling their attention to areas that are